Do you want to start?
Yes.
Dun 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 dun.
Hi there and welcome to Goat Any Last Words, the podcast for Air Cadets. I'm CI Me.
I'm Sergeant White. I thought we introduced each other.
Oh, shall we try again? That's Sergeant White.
CI Me.
That you didn't have a lot of gumption in that.
This is CI Me.
And this is Sergeant White. So, Sergeant White, what are we covering today? I'm really excited. Last week, we started plane crash investigations. It was really, really, really interesting. So, what have you got in store for us this week?
Today we are talking about Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, also known as MH370.
Is this the one that went missing?
Yes. Still missing.
Wow.
So, are you ready?
I am. I'm really excited for this because I'm a bit of a sucker for conspiracy theories and things like that. Obviously, I know a lot of them aren't true, but this one is still a mystery to this day. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow, okay, yeah, I'm ready. So we'll buckle in, get our pens and our papers. I'm just trying to think what the cadets might be doing now. Get your FIFA game open. Eat your mum's tea and listen in.
Eat your mum's tea.
No, they're probably listening to it after tea,
Oh,
I don't know.
Eat the tea your mum's made for you, not eat your mum's tea.
Oh yeah, you got to eat her tea as well. Anyway, this is going off piste. All I'm saying is we're excited. Go for it.
Thank you. So, MH30 was a scheduled international passenger flight operated by Malaysian Airlines, and you'll find in a lot of these plane crashes, Malaysian Airlines turns up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Nothing on their flying abilities, just
It's a trend.
seems to be the case. Yeah. So, this flight disappeared on March the 8th, 2014, and it was flying from Kuala Lumpur International Airport to its planned destination of Beijing Capital International Airport.
Yeah.
So, it left the radar range 200 nautical miles northwest of the Penang Island, which is in the northwestern peninsula of Malaysia.
Yeah.
So, it had 227 passengers and 12 crew aboard, and they were all presumed dead. So, the disappearance of Flight 370 was the deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777 and the deadliest incident in Malaysian Airlines history until it was surpassed by both regards by another Malaysian Airlines flight, which was shot down over conflict-stricken eastern Ukraine 4 months later. I don't know whether you remember that.
I actually don't. Whoa.
Right. So, Flight 370 was operated with a Boeing 777. It was the 404th Boeing 777 to be produced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they've made quite a few before they made this one. And it was first flown on the 14th of May 2002. So it accumulated about 53,000 flying hours and around 7,500 cycles. And cycles count as like a takeoff and a landing.
Is this that particular Boeing 777?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
The one in question.
Yeah, it was the 404th plane.
Right, okay, yeah.
Had that many flying hours, yeah. So there have been no major incidents with this particular plane other than a small little ding where at Shanghai International Airport they kind of broke the wingtip off.
Right, okay.
But I mean,
how much of the wingtip are we talking here?
not the whole wing, but the wingtip. I think they just.
We're talking size of a chia seed? Or
I think we're talking like maybe a bit of A4 piece of paper, kind of just
right,
cracked
okay.
it, but went and got fixed, so it was fine. So its last maintenance A check, which I'm presuming is the highest class of check they do, was carried out on the 23rd of February 2014. The aircraft was in compliance with all applicable airworthiness directives for the airframe and its engines. So both the airframe and the engines all were up to standard. So there was nothing out of the ordinary about this plane. So the Boeing 777 was introduced in 1994 and had an excellent safety record. So it's known for being a very safe plane. So since its first commercial flight in June of 1995, the type has only suffered 6 other hull losses. So there's been 7 in total, but this is 6 other incidences where something has happened to a Boeing 777.
Right, okay.
So one was the British Airways Flight 38 in 2008. There was a cockpit fire in a parked Air Egypt flight in Cairo. In 2011, there was a crash In 2013, There was another crash in which 3 people died, and then there was the incident where the plane was shot down, so the Malaysian Airlines one in Ukraine. And finally, there was Emirates Flight 521, which crashed and burned out whilst landing at Dubai International Airport in August of 2016. So,
and did all the passengers die?
No.
All right.
The only ones they died in are the ones that I've said how many casualties.
All right. Okay.
So there's like 2, well 3, including this one.
Yeah.
But yeah. So who was on the aircraft? We'll just do a little cover on that. So the aircraft was carrying 12 Malaysian crew members and 227 passengers from 14 different nations. So on the day of the disappearance, Malaysia Airlines released the names and the nationalities of the passengers and crew based on the flight manifest. The passenger list was later modified to include 2 Iranian passengers travelling on stolen Austrian and Italian passports.
Whoa.
So they had to add another nationality to the list.
Right,
because
okay.
2 people were actually Iranian, but they were using stolen passports.
Whoa.
Yeah. So all 12 crew members, 2 pilots and 10 cabin staff were Malaysian citizens. So this was a fully Malaysian staffed air flight.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the pilot. So the pilot in command was a 53-year-old Captain Zania Ahmad Shah from Penang. He joined Malaysian Airlines as a cadet pilot in 1981. He received his training, he got his commercial pilot's license, and he became a second officer with the airline in 1983. He was promoted to captain of the Boeing 737, so a different airliner, in 1981. He became the captain of an Airbus A330 in 1996, and then finally became the captain of the Boeing 777 in 1998. He had a total of 18,365 hours of flying experience.
Right. So he was a pro.
He was
seasoned professional.
Yeah, he's taken off and landed a few times.
Yeah.
And then we get on to our first officer. So our first officer was 27-year-old Farik Abdul Hamid. He joined Malaysian Airlines as a cadet pilot in 2007. He became the second officer of a Boeing 737 airliner, and then in November 2013, he began his training to be the first officer of a Boeing 777. So Flight 370, the flight in question, was his final training flight before he was scheduled to be examined on his next flight.
Wow.
So this was his final, test flight.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, it's quite sad.
That's so sad.
Farik had accumulated 2,763 hours of flying experience. So, not a lot, but he's flown on a few different planes, and he was about to become the first officer of the 777. So, of the 227 passengers, 153 were Chinese citizens, including a group of 19 artists, with 6 family members and 4 staff returning from a calligraphy exhibition of their work in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Good old calligraphy exhibition in Kuala Lumpur.
I love that.
Yeah. 38 of the passengers were Malaysian. The remaining passengers were from 12 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
So, like always, we'll now just go through kind of as best we can, a timeline as to what happened.
Yeah.
So this is in the time frame on their... This isn't Universal Standard Time. This is Malaysian time.
Okay.
So, at 0042, so 1:45 in the morning, Flight 370 took off from runway 32R and was cleared by air traffic control to climb to level 180. And level 180 is approximately 1,800 feet. And they were directed to go through to a navigational waypoint at this point as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, the voice analysis has determined that the first officer communicated with air traffic control whilst the flight was on the ground, and that the captain communicated with air traffic control after departure.
Right, okay.
Shortly after departure, the flight was transferred from the airport's ATC to Lumpur radar. And Lumpur radar is the name of the frequency used for en route air traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So once you're up in the sky, you go off the ATC's frequency and you go onto Lumpur radar, which I presume is something to do with the fact we're in Kuala Lumpur.
Mm-hmm.
I presume.
Yeah.
So, at 0046, so 5 minutes later, Lumpur radar cleared flight 370 get to the flight level 350.
Mm-hmm.
So from knowing what 180 is, can you imagine what 350 was?
Yeah. A lot higher.
A lot higher. So 3,500 feet.
Yeah.
At 1:01, Flight 370's crew reported to the Lumpur radar that they had reached the flight level 350.
Okay.
And they confirmed that again at 1:08.
Mm-hmm.
The aircraft's final transmission was an automated position report sent using the aircraft's communication addressing and reporting system, otherwise known as ACARS.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at 1:06.
Right, okay.
So we're going in like minutes here. We're not going over like large periods of time.
And it's only really just set off as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they basically just got clearance to take off. They've climbed to cruising altitude. And then that's really...
And is that the point where they disappear, where the transmissions stop?
Not yet.
Right,
Not
okay.
yet. So among the data provided in this message was the total fuel remaining, and this was 43,800 kilograms.
Okay.
And planes always carry more fuel than they need, and they carry enough fuel to normally get to 2 different airports. So, like, they'll have 2 emergency airports that they need to land at, and whether that's something that is wrong with their plane or whether there's, like, an emergency at the airport that they can't land at, they always have to have enough to fly to at least, like, 2 other airports, basically.
Right, okay.
On a short-haul flight, that's probably a bit harder, but, like, on long-haul flights, they have enough space to take enough. So they definitely had enough fuel at this point. It wasn't like the fuel just dropped out of the plane or whatever.
No, yeah.
So the last verbal signal to air traffic control occurred at 1:19.
Right, okay.
Where Captain Zahir acknowledged a transmission from Lumpur radar to Ho Chi Minh, which is the next kind of airspace they were going into.
Right, okay.
So Lumpur radar basically said, Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9, good night. And Flight 370 replied, good night, Malaysian 370.
Whoa, that's quite poignant, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that is the last transmission from them.
Yes, that's the
So
last transmission between like 2 people. Like,
so that was them actually speaking. Was that the first officer speaking?
yeah, as far as I'm aware, that's the first officer. Yeah.
Whoa, that is quite poignant, isn't it? Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's quite. The fact that the last message was a good night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the crew was expected to signal to air traffic control in Ho Chi Minh City as the aircraft passed into Vietnamese airspace.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically just north of where the point of contact was lost.
Mm-hmm.
So they were about to fly into it. They should have messaged through. The captain of another aircraft attempted to contact the flight crew of Flight 370 shortly after 1:30 using the International Air Distress Frequency.
Right, okay.
So like plane to plane, there's an international air distress frequency that they could radio in with. And then to relay Vietnamese air traffic controllers' request for the airway, for the crew to contact them. So basically the Vietnamese air traffic controllers contact this plane and were like, hey, we can't get in contact with this plane. Is there any chance you could use this frequency to try and get in contact with them and let them know they need to contact us?
Mm-hmm.
The captain said he was able to establish communication, but only heard mumbling and static.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So calls made to Flight 370's cockpit at 2:39 and 7:13 were unanswered, but acknowledged by the aircraft. So the aircraft had the capability to acknowledge the message, but they went unanswered.
Right, okay. So does that imply that they were still okay, that everything was still okay at that point?
Not necessarily. It just means that whatever equipment was picking up the message was still...
It's like when you're in WhatsApp and it says received. So the message has been delivered, but it doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, and you could necessarily be dead.
Yeah, okay.
But the equipment at that point was still able to do it.
Okay.
So, at 1:20, Flight 370 was observed on radar at the Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control Centre as it passed the navigational waypoint on the Gulf of Thailand. So they can see it. They're like,
so it's a visual...
They're like, oh, it's a radar. It's not, they can't...
Right,
they're not
okay.
like, oh, there it is.
Right,
They're
yeah.
like looking at dot on the screen. At 1:21, Flight 370 disappeared from the radar screen at Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control and was lost about the same time on the radar at Ho Chi Minh as well.
Right, okay.
So when they look back on their reports, they can see that they basically lost signal from the plane
like
at the
the
exact
dot disappeared.
at the exact same time.
Yeah.
And Ho Chi Minh reported that the aircraft was at a nearby waypoint, so that it should have been being picked up again.
Yeah.
So air traffic control uses secondary radar, which relies on the signal emitted by a transponder on each aircraft. Therefore, the transponder was no longer functioning on Flight 370 after 121.
Right, okay.
So they can use this secondary radar that uses what's on the plane, and that wasn't working.
Okay.
So for what reason it wasn't working?
Something's amiss.
Something's gone wrong, yeah. The final transponder data indicated that the aircraft was flying at its assigned cruise altitude, which was 350, and was travelling at 471 knots true airspeed. So there were a lot of clouds at this point. There was no rain. There was no lightning or anything like that. And when they went back, they have analysed all this data more, and they've estimated that Flight 370 had 41,500 kilograms of fuel when it disappeared from secondary radar.
Right, okay.
So more than enough fuel. It's not like the fuel just dropped out the tank.
Yeah,
like
that doesn't
more
happen.
than enough fuel to get you anywhere. Yeah. So at the time that the transponder stopped functioning, military radar showed Flight 370 turning right, but then began to turn left in a southwesterly direction.
Okay.
From 1:30 until 1:35, military radar showed Flight 370 at 35,700 feet on a 321 magnetic heading with a ground speed of 496 knots. So we're basically like within the same, like what the military radar is showing is very similar to the airspeed that the normal civilian air traffic control was showing as well.
So it could imply that at this point, even though their transmissions had stopped, they were still okay and just continuing with their job as normal.
They weren't traveling at like 0 knots, and they weren't like falling out of the sky. Like
they didn't do what the Air Asia plane did and just peak up suddenly.
Yeah.
There was nothing
It looks
amiss.
like they were going a little bit faster, but it didn't. It was more evidence as to the fact that it didn't just fall out the sky.
Yeah.
Because obviously military radar is very different to civilian radar and things like that. So Flight 370 continued across the Malay Peninsula, fluctuating between 3,100 or 31,000 and 33,000 feet in altitude. So we're going like 2,000 kind of between. So civilian primary radar at Sultan Amil Petra Airport with a 60 nautical mile range made 4 detections of unidentified aircraft between 1:30 in the morning and 1:52. Right, okay. So the fact that it only has this short range and it's having... That's an indication that maybe it was within this airspace. The tracks of the unidentified aircraft are consistent with those of the military data. So because it's an unidentified aircraft, they can't say, well, it's that aircraft because it's unidentified.
Oh, it was the Boeing 777, of course, yeah.
But the military data, the military radar data, and this little 60 nautical miles radar tower, they kind of paint the same picture. So it looks like it could be true. So at 1:52, Flight 370 was detected passing just south of the island of Penang. From there, the aircraft flew across the Strait of Malacca. So a lot of countries were reluctant to release information collected from their military radar because the sensitivity of revealing what their capabilities are.
Right.
They didn't want to be like, we saw it coming from, like, England.
Yeah.
Like, if we pitched in, they'd be like, what kind of radar have you got? So some countries that were close didn't want to...
That would probably start conversations which they didn't want to have.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to give away... Because if you're like, well, we didn't pick it up, then you can be like, well, your radar sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if you can't even reach it from here, but then...
It's better to say nothing than say
so they were
something
they
that
were quite reserved at revealing sensitive data about the capabilities of their radar. So Indonesia has an early warning radar system, but its air traffic control radar did not register any aircraft within the transponder code used by Flight 370. So it has an early warning system to detect if planes were entering it, and it didn't it didn't get that message. So whether it did go into that airspace and it just wasn't very good, or whether it didn't, that they'll only know that.
Yeah.
So despite their aircraft possibly have flown near or over the northern tip of Sumatra. Welcome, sir.
Excuse me, listeners. We have a rogue cat trying to destroy our video stream. Anyway, continue, Sergeant.
So, Indonesian military radar tracked Flight 370 earlier when it was en route to this waypoint, and the transponder is thought to have been turned off.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't provide any information on whether it was detected afterwards.
Okay.
So we still don't really know. So Thailand and Vietnam also detected Flight 370 on radar before the transponder stopped working. The radar position symbols for the transponder code used by Flight 370 vanished after the transponder is thought to have been turned off. So everything's adding up here.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting the same kind of messages. We've all dropped off the screen at the same time. We're all kind of getting... We all know there's like this random plane and it's sometimes on someone's radar that makes sense because it's on someone else's. Like,
well, they're linking up all the disparate pieces, aren't they? They don't know what actually happened, so you have to look at the secondary evidence, don't you, and piece it together.
Exactly.
To sort of work out what actually happened that day.
Exactly. So, Malaysian Airlines issued a media statement at 7:24 in the morning. So this is 1 hour after the scheduled arrival time of the flight at Beijing. So an hour afterwards, they were like, yep, it hasn't just taken a shortcut. Something is not right.
Yeah.
And they stated that communication with the flight had been lost by Malaysian air traffic control at 2:40 and that the government had initiated search and rescue operations.
Mm-hmm.
Neither the crew nor the communications systems relayed a distress signal. They didn't relay indications of bad weather or any technical problems before the aircraft vanished from the radar.
Right.
So unlike with some crashes that we'll talk about where they'll send out a distress signal, there'll be something, there'll be weather. Like in the last one we talked about, the weather caused them to deviate. There's just nothing here. There's no...
Oh.
Yeah, there's no... You know,
it's a real mystery
evidence
then,
of
isn't
a struggle, yeah. So on the 24th of March, the Malaysian Prime Minister appeared before the media at 10 o'clock local time to give a statement regarding Flight 370, in which he announced that there had briefly been communication that had since been lost, and he had concluded that the last position before it had disappeared was in the southern Indian Ocean. As there was no places that it could have landed, the aircraft therefore must have crashed into the sea.
Right, okay.
So just before he spoke at 10 o'clock, there was an emergency meeting called in Beijing for the relatives of Flight 370 passengers. Because obviously it's much nicer to be contacted by them rather than just finding out on the news.
Yeah.
Malaysian Airlines announced that Flight 370 was assumed lost with no survivors. It notified most of the families in person or via telephone, and some received an SMS.
Oh my goodness me! Can you imagine that?
English and Chinese. They put both on. English and Chinese.
Get a text.
Yeah. Informing them that it was likely the aircraft had crashed with no survivors.
Imagine waking up to that.
Can you imagine being the person that has to do the phone call?
Oh, that is awful.
Yeah. So the news media reported several sightings of the aircraft fitting the description of the missing Boeing 777.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, on the 19th of March 2014, CNN reported that witnesses, including some fishermen and an oil rig worker and some other people in the Maldives, had seen the missing airliner. Fishermen claimed to have seen an unusually low-flying aircraft off the coast of Kota, while an oil rig worker who was 186 miles away from the southeast of Vung Tau claimed that he saw a burning object in the sky that morning, and these claims were credible enough for the Vietnamese authorities to send out a search and rescue mission.
Right, okay, yeah.
So the search and rescue was launched soon after the disappearance of 370. They used a lot of different ways to try and find this plane. So they tried to use aircraft, satellite, surface searches. They didn't really know where to look, so they were kind of just looking everywhere and anywhere. So on the 18th of March until the 28th of April, 19 vessels, 345 kind of sorties, so they aircraft flew over 345 45 times
Yeah.
military aircraft. And they searched over 4,600,000 square kilometers.
Wow.
Like massive, like expansive area. So the final phase of the search was a sonar search of the sea floor, about 1,800 kilometres southwest of Perth in Western Australia. On the 17th of January 2017, the official search for Flight 370, which had been proven the most expensive search operation in aviation history, was suspended after yielding no evidence of the aircraft other than some marine debris off the coast of Africa. So,
nothing.
Not a...
Because I was going to suggest, well, obviously, they probably know more than... Well, they will know more than me, but, like, you'd think that if it did explode, say, it would be spread over...
Yeah.
Hundreds of miles, maybe?
It doesn't this doesn't necessarily follow the suit of a lot of plane crashes that had happened before either. Like, a lot of the time they'll find the debris, even if it is in the sea. But with this, because they didn't really know when it went down, they didn't really know where to look. So they published a report in October of 2017 stating, they basically said, like, we'll do this underwater search for the aircraft, and as of 30th of June 2017, it had cost a total of $155 million.
Oh my goodness me.
Yeah. So the report also concluded that the location of where the aircraft went down had been narrowed down to an area of 25,000 square kilometres using satellite images and debris drift analysis.
Wow.
I think I'd quite like to be a debris drift analyzer.
Get that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah. Sounds like a good job. Yeah, I'm here from the debris
Well,
drift.
it's probably sort of like maybe analysing explosion patterns, like what direction the debris would go in, or like how it would
I think it's
land.
probably closely linked to what they do in like
blood splatter.
Not blood splatter.
Because that's what I first thought.
No, I'm thinking more it's to do with the riptides of the ocean. Like, if something was to go here, where would it... Like, you know, when they have, like, those murder investigations where they're like, right, if they threw the bag in the river here, where would the riptides have taken it?
Yeah.
More than, like, how did it blow up?
Like, what was the wind?
Yeah. Because
what direction was the wind going in?
Yeah.
And all
once
that
it's
kind
in
of
the
stuff.
water, once it's blown up, it's just going to go everywhere. Like, I think the debris drift analysis is more like, where is it drifting? Where are the weather patterns?
Well, we have a recurring theme in these podcasts where jobs exist now that didn't exist 10 years ago, and I think debris drift analysis will be one of them.
So the first item of debris to be positively identified as originating from Flight 370 was the starboard trailing edge control surface. So the little, like, aileron.
So they found that.
They found that.
They found something actually. I didn't know they'd actually found something.
It was discovered in late July 2015 on a beach in San Andreas.
On a beach. Oh my goodness me.
And San Andreas is an island in the West Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
If you didn't know. So about 4,000 kilometers west of the underwater sea rescue area, or like where they were looking, 4,000 kilometers west.
Yeah.
So that debris drift analysis really did
big amount of drift.
pay off, didn't it? So finally, we're just going to talk about what are some of the reasons that they think maybe we had this fail.
Yeah.
So the first one is power interruption. So the satellite communications link functioned normally from pre-flight, beginning at midnight, until it responded to a ground-to-air message with the acknowledgement message at 7 minutes past 1.
Mm-hmm.
So for an hour, we knew it functioned fine. The ground-to-air messages continued to be transmitted to Flight 370 until the network sent multiple request for acknowledgement messages at 2:03 without a response from the aircraft. So at some time between 1:07 and 2:03, power was lost. At 2:25, the aircraft sent a log-on request. And it's not common for a log-on request to be made in flight.
Right.
But it could occur for a few different reasons. So an analysis of the characteristics and timing of these requests suggests that a power interruption in flight is the most likely culprit.
Okay.
As the power interruption was not due to engine flame out, it may have been a result of manually switching off the aircraft's electrical system. So once again,
That can't just be a button though, can it?
well, the last one, the pilot was just like, oh, this is annoying. Switch that off and on again.
Surely, like, the whole... The thing that powers the entire electrical system...
Not the whole electrical system, but like I think maybe...
It can't just be a switch though,
But
can
that's
it?
what happened in the last one.
Yeah.
He switched it off, and then all the systems that were meant to be on rebooted and didn't reboot up properly because they weren't meant to be switched off during flight.
In mid-flight, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So it's possible. The other reason. So, unresponsive crew or hypoxia. So do you know what hypoxia is?
Is it something to do with the lack of oxygen?
Yes. So I deal with it a lot at work
Mm-hmm.
when babies don't want to breathe. So an analysis of the aileron,
Mhm.
you know, from the one that we found in San Andreas, showed...
The what, sorry?
San Andreas. I'm just feeling a little bit like I want to go on holiday. Showed that the landing flaps were not extended, supporting the spiral dive at high speed theory.
Right, okay.
So in May of 2018, the board that were discussing this again asserted that the flight was not in control when it crashed. Its spokesperson said that we have quite a bit of data to tell us that the aircraft was being controlled at the end. It wasn't being very successfully controlled.
Right, okay.
So basically saying, if it was being controlled, they weren't doing
a very
well.
good job, were they?
Yeah, basically. They're basically saying there's no way they could have been controlling it, and if they were, wow.
Goodness me.
And the other kind of human-y one is passenger involvement. So if you remember back to those two men who boarded with the stolen passports.
Right, okay, yeah.
So obviously that raised a bit of suspicion in the immediate aftermath of the disappearance because, you know, plane goes missing and two people with dodgy passports seems like it's a bit, you know.
Something sinister. It could be something sinister.
Yeah, exactly. So the passports of one Austrian and one Italian had previously been stolen in Thailand 2 years. Like, they've been reported that they've been, like, stolen 2 years before.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 one-way tickets purchased for these passports were booked through China Southern Airlines. It was reported that an Iranian had ordered the cheapest tickets to Europe via telephone in Bangkok and paid by cash.
Okay, well, that's extremely sinister.
A bit sus. Like, you know, you got 2 dodgy passports.
How did I not know about this?
You
This
paid
is
over
crazy.
he booked them over the phone. He got the cheapest tickets, which I mean isn't necessarily like weird, but
That's
the
what I
fact that
do.
you paid in cash. So, like we said, these 2 passengers were later identified as Iranian men. One was 19 and the other was 29. They'd enter Malaysia on the 28th of February using valid Iranian passports. So they come in on their real passports and somehow managed to obtain or had with them fake passports. The 2 men were believed to be asylum seekers. So basically, it wasn't an attack.
Right, okay.
They were just 2 men that were trying to buy a ticket to Europe using dodgy passports and cash.
So they just needed somewhere safe to
Because
go.
I suppose something to do with the card maybe would have traced them back to the fact they weren't their passports, and they thought it'd be easier just to do it with cash. So basically, an unfortunate circumstance to do with the fact that the plane crashed and made them look proper guilty. But actually, they were pretty right.
They're probably they were just trying to find asylum, yeah.
Yeah. So other than that, there was one other passenger that people were a bit like, ooh, who worked as a flight engineer for a Swiss jet charter company. He was briefly under suspicion as a potential hijacker because he was thought to have the relevant aviation skills.
Right.
They thought he knows how this plane works. He's done it.
He could drive.
I think that was more of like they looked through everyone's occupation. They were like, oh, and then they were like, nah,
not likely.
Yeah. So some people thought that the most likely explanation to be that someone in the cockpit of Flight 370 reprogrammed the aircraft's autopilot to travel south across the border to the Indian Ocean. So the police searched the homes of the pilots and seized financial records from all 12 crew members, including bank statements, credit card bills, and mortgage documents.
Imagine having the police come over and after you'd lost your relatives and they're like, okay, we need to take apart all your stuff. And
I suppose at this point, though, you'd probably be in shock and you probably just want to figure out what's happened.
I guess so.
Maybe. So on the 2nd of April 2014, Malaysia's police inspector said that more than 170 interviews had been conducted as part of Malaysia's criminal investigation, including interviews with the family members of both the pilots and all of the crew. So media reports claimed that Malaysian police identified Captain Zahir as the prime subject if human intervention were eventually to be proven the cause of Flight 370's. So they couldn't be like, it's him, but they were like, if you run out of options, we think it's him.
But what? Okay, so why? What were the reasons?
So they reconstructed deleted data from his... He has a home flight simulator, obviously, because he's a pilot.
Yeah.
So this was America. This was the FBI that was doing all this.
Okay.
They reconstructed the deleted data.
Why did the FBI get involved with it?
Because the FBI just sticks their oar in everywhere, don't they?
Yeah.
They're like, we're the best. We'll do it.
Because it's a Malaysia Airlines issue. Surely it should be somewhere in that region.
Yeah,
It's nothing to do with
So
the
Malaysian
American.
Airlines spokesman basically said, there's nothing sinister. Like, it's fine. So in 2016, an American document stated that a route on the pilot's home simulator, which closely matched the projected flight over the Indian Ocean, was found during the FBI analysis of the flight simulator's computer hard drive.
Well, surely he's just practicing the flight.
So basically, the Malaysian government was like, yeah, like, that's true, but like that doesn't prove that he had any involvement in it. And Vietnam were like, yeah, we saw it too, but we didn't think anything of it. You know, we don't think he's done it. So yeah,
Paranoid Americans.
Yeah, they don't think it's him. And then finally, as always, aliens. There is always people out there.
You've always got to get
who
to
are
this.
gonna think.
And you know what? I'm here for it. I will listen to these theories. It's interesting.
Like, where did it go? Where did it come from? Where did you go?
Where did you come from? Malaysian Airlines.
MH370.
Okay, that doesn't have the same ring of it.
Go and zero rhymed.
So I want you to sing it for me, Sergeant.
Where did you come from? Where did you go? Where did you come from? MH370. So yeah, that is the disappearance of MH370.
Wait, do you not have anything more about aliens?
Well, just as always, aliens.
Oh, I was hoping you'd have
There's
a
no,
whole
like,
smorgasbord of alien theories.
Specific.
Let's turn this podcast into an alien podcast.
There's nothing specifically about. It's just in general, people are like, did the aliens suck it out the sky and
But
drop
then
it?
they found the aileron anyway.
Oh yeah, but
wait,
people...
they found the aileron?
Yeah.
Alien Ron.
Yeah, it's actually an alien called Ron. It was like, there's my signature.
It's like, here we
lads.
go.
Yeah, I think people think maybe it was like sucked up into the sky, and maybe like the aileron just like fell off or something.
Are there not any sort of theories based around Bermuda Triangle-esque?
Well, it wasn't where the Bermuda Triangle was.
I know,
so.
esque, like sort of similar.
As far as I'm aware, no.
No.
I think it's just one of those things where people always are going to be like, was it aliens?
I think they just don't want to know. They and I don't blame them for this. They just don't want to realise the fact that they are somewhere. But
I think ultimately the other causes that this, large scale, very expensive report came up with are probably more likely than aliens.
yeah. Well, don't hold your breath.
But that is one of the greatest mysteries of aviation crashes, this one.
I wonder if in our lifetime they will find any
They're
more
still
evidence of it.
searching. Every now and again, there'll still be a news report being like, we found a speck of paint from the MH370 crash. And
It's
they're
so
like,
sad because
oh, no.
for a lot of the victims' family, they won't have closure until
It's just weird,
they
though,
can bring
isn't
them
it?
home,
Like 200 and something people have just disappeared into the sea.
That is so bizarre. It's so sad.
But
It's
the fact they
tragic.
can't find anything, and like with the advancements of if they can scan Loch Ness to check there's not a monster in there, they should be able to scan the sea.
I mean, let's hope that one day they can, and
Yeah.
that they find the bodies and are able to take them back to their families.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, another intense one, but really, really interesting. And I hope that you come back to me next time with aliens. Otherwise, I will be thoroughly disappointed.
Alien crashes.
Alien Ron crashes.
Yeah, crashes that.
We'll bring him in. He can have an interview. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to Go Any Last Words. I've been CI
I'm Sergeant White.
Make sure you follow us on Spotify because we release this podcast every single week, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can watch our podcast with a video and you can see us trying to deal with our cats jumping on tables and things like that because that's always fun. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Go Any Last Words, a weekly podcast for Air Cadets, released every Friday. Got Any Last Words was written, produced, and presented by Sergeant White and CI Me of 361 Cadets Squadron. Sound effects by Motion Array. Podcast theme is Grow by KV.